If you're thinking about transitioning into a clinical documentation integrity role, but you're feeling stuck because of the experience required roadblock, you are not alone. We've all been there. So in this video, we are going to walk through practical steps to help increase your chance of landing a remote CDI job, even if you don't have direct CDI experience yet. We will cover what to learn, certifications to consider, and how to strategically position yourself for these roles. And stick around until the end where we will see some CDI roles that, per the job description, do not require CDI experience. Again, that's per the job description. I think we have about 8 roles that we're going to look at, but hang with me and we'll go through those. But first, let's get started into our journey to a remote CDI job. Okay, so before we get into that, let's understand what a CDI specialist does. So a CDI specialist reviews medical records to ensure that provider documentation accurately reflects the patient's diagnoses, treatments, and overall clinical picture. This helps improve the quality and completeness of medical records. By clarifying ambiguous or incomplete documentation, CDI specialists help ensure proper ICD-10 PCS code assignment, which directly impacts hospital reimbursement and compliance with coding regulations. CDI specialists help hospitals meet regulatory requirements, improve case mix index, and support quality initiatives such as mortality rates, severity of illness, risk of mortality, and publicly reported health metrics, all while making sure that our medical record is compliant and quality driven. Okay, so what is our first step? So, as we know, getting the first role as a CDI specialist can be very difficult. Many jobs ask for experience, and it can feel like a catch-22. You need to get experience to get hired, but you need a job to gain the experience. This is where investing in yourself becomes a game changer. When you take the time to educate yourself and strengthen clinical documentation skills, earn relevant certifications like the CCDS or CDIP, and optimize your resume for CDI roles, you make yourself a much stronger candidate. Think of it this way: every skill you gain, every course you take, and every networking connection you make is an investment that increases your value. So ask yourself, are you treating yourself like your best asset? All right, so let's look at some practical examples of how you can invest in yourself. Number one, so this is a free document that is published both by ACDIS and AHIMA. This is called the Guidelines for Achieving a Compliant Query Practice. All CDI specialists must know these guidelines from start to finish and implement them and practice them in their day-to-day role. Having a strong command of the guidelines for achieving a compliant query practice is critical in the day-to-day operations of a CDI specialist. This is a free document, and at the end, I'll provide you a resource where you can click a link to open up the document and read through it and understand and educate yourself on the guidelines. Number two, invest in the Pinson and Tang CDI Pocket Guide. Now, before I say and promote any of these things, I want to say that I'm not an affiliate. There's nothing that I'm getting out of this other than that I just love to share great resources. And the CDI Pocket Guide is one of them. It is packed with details on key conditions like sepsis, heart failure, pneumonia, respiratory failure that CDI specialists review on the daily. Now, the compact reference will become your most valuable learning tool. They also have free, I'm talking free, CDI webinars and library of past webinars that you can access. Also, what I love about this tool is it's not only very heavy clinically based, but it comes with a balance of ICD-10 and PCS coding regulations that complement every single condition that they discuss with relative coding guidelines, coding clinics. Again, it is jam-packed and it is well worth the yearly or annual subscription to the online tool or the book itself. I prefer the online tool because you get active updates. In any case, a wonderful resource that will be worth your investment. Okay, and number three, invest in a CDIP, CCDS, or CIC course. Now, we'll get a little bit more into details why I picked these three, but investing in one of these courses can help you open doors to CDI positions when you lack the experience necessary. All of these courses and certifications come with some coding information, the ICD-10 coding piece of the CDI specialist role that is essential to being a successful CDI specialist. These certifications can increase job marketability, strengthen your expertise in clinical documentation and coding, and set you apart in the industry. All right, so here, let's break down these certifications in a little bit more detail and why they made the list. So first on my list would be the CDIP, which is a Certified Documentation Integrity Practitioner Credential, and that is through AHIMA. This is excellent for RNs or HIM professionals looking to demonstrate CDI experience. This certification validates your knowledge of documentation requirements and improvement strategies. Now, this is number one on my list because a couple of reasons. Number one, you do not need CDI experience to take this exam. So I think this is a great option. If you know you want to go into CDI and that's the route you want to take for sure, then this is a certification that I would start with. If you have zero experience and you want to study and you want to work toward a more immediate goal and a more immediate certification. The second certification, of course, is the CCDS, and that is through ACDIS. And the Certified Clinical Documentation Specialist credential is another strong option focused specifically on clinical documentation practices. This certification shows employers you understand CDI principles and query processes, very similar to the CDIP. However, to get the CCDS credential, you have to have 2 years of experience in CDI or chart auditing practices, okay? So, and it can't be just through your documentation in an EHR as a nurse. So again, we are in this video talking about getting a CDI role without any experience. So I'm assuming that you do not have any experience. So the CCDS could be a longer option or a second option down the road. Now they do have a new apprentice program, but again, if you're wanting to get a credential right off the bat, I do recommend first the CDIP, getting a course for that, learning that. They have some practice exams on their website. And again, I'll give you a resource where you can link into all of these options and read for yourself what would be the best option and path for you. Next on my list is the CIC AAPC. Now, this is not specific to clinical documentation improvement. And the reason it made my list is because it does give you a strong command and it exemplifies a strong command of certified inpatient coder ability. Now, you have to fully understand ICD-10-CM and ICD-10-PCS. And with this credential, there are many other opportunities that could be available other than CDI. So again, it made my list because when nurses come to me and they want my advice on what would be a good credential to get to open up doors to remote roles, and they're not really sure yet what they want to do, I always recommend the coding certification first because it does lend to more diversity in roles. So that's the CIC, the CPC through AAPC, or the CCA on the HEMA website. And again, they're more entry-level coding credentials, and I highly recommend them if you're not sure you want to go into CDI, because again, an RN having a coding credential can open up a lot more doors rather than just CDI. And you have to know the coding piece of CDI anyway. So it's a great segue into CDI. If you're not sure that that's where you want to go, it doesn't hurt. Again, none of this education will ever hurt you. It only adds value to you. I started with the CPC credential. It's not really where I wanted to start. I wanted to start with inpatient. However, I did get a role way back when that required me to have the CPC. So I took the CPC course, I got my CPC, and then I later transitioned into inpatient where I have stayed for the past 14 years. And I absolutely love inpatient. But again, everybody is different. And you starting out, you really don't know maybe what direction you want to go. So if that is you, then I would start with a coding credential, again, because it offers up many other opportunities and it's not just so CDI focused. However, it can transition into a CDI role because CDI specialists really do need to have a strong command of inpatient coding. And again, that is more where, in my experience, I see CDI specialists struggle. The clinical piece comes easier. The coding piece is harder. So if you start with the coding piece, then you can add the clinical later. But again, if you already know CDI is what I want to do, I would start with the CDIP, go that way, get that, and then later, when you get some experience, you can transition and maybe add a coding credential. Which brings me to one of my favorite credentials, which is the CCS. And the Certified Coding Specialist credential is ideal if you want a coding-heavy approach to CDI. Now, CCS is no joke. It does take experience. It is a harder credential to achieve without experience. And again, that's why it is last on my list. You also have to know and have a command of CPT, which again is more outpatient based, which again makes it a harder credential. So I really don't recommend this right off the bat, but again, it is the gold standard really at this moment for inpatient coding, and it really does exemplify that you have a strong command of inpatient coding, which again is essential for the clinical documentation improvement specialist. CDIs typically do not have the final coding on the chart, but anywhere that I have worked, the CDI specialists actually code the chart first, and you have to understand the coding and how the documentation impacts the coding to be able to know when to query, when a query is necessary, and the impact that query is going to have on the coding. So they go hand in hand. So again, it is extremely important to have a strong command of ICD-10-CM and ICD-10-PCS, okay? So I'm going to say about these, but again, my two top ones, if I were in your position where I would start without any experience, would be the CDIP or the CIC. Again, the CCDS takes a couple years experience to even sit for the exam. The CDIP and CIC do not. Now, if you are really ambitious and you are really serious and really passionate and know you want to go in to CDI and you can't get a job, I would start with the CDIP. If you're still not getting a job with that, I would go in and I would go and get my CIC. And with those two credentials behind your name plus an RN, I do believe that would give you such a great chance. All right, so unpopular opinion, but I'm going to say it anyway. Be open to on-site or hybrid roles for experience. I know that the goal here is to get a remote role, but we really need to be realistic about that. And you want to be realistic about what your training needs may be as someone coming into the profession without any experience. It really is ideal at first to be on site where you're being trained if you don't have any experience. Many employers won't hire remote CDI specialists without prior experience. So considering a local on-site or hybrid role first to get your foot in the door can be a life changer. Some hospitals are willing to train nurses or coders into CDI positions and then transition to remote. So then you want to leverage related experience. So you want to highlight any experience that you may have had in maybe in utilization review or case management and how that experience is translating into what a CDI professional does or any interactions that you've had with CDI specialists over the years and maybe some education that they provided to you as a nurse. And then after that, and you get some experience, then you can transition to remote. All right. Very important. We want to make sure that our resume is optimized. Number one, we need to use an ATS-friendly formatting with keywords like query writing, clinical indicators, and medical necessity. Make your resume stand out by highlighting transferable skills from your background. Now, I say this, but what is most important is taking the job description, looking at every detail of what you will be responsible for, looking at the qualifications, and making sure your resume matches exactly what is in the job description. You want those keywords to be formatted exactly as the job posting says, because the applicant tracking system will pick up on those keywords when you are among many candidates, and at least yours will get in front of the right person. So then, crafting a compelling cover letter. I cannot stress enough how much a cover letter will set you apart from someone who does not have a cover letter. This is where you can explain, while even though you maybe don't have all of the experience in the job posting, why you think you would be a good candidate. And we're going to look at an example of a cover letter in a minute, but you want to customize each cover letter specific to the job posting, just as we spoke about with the resume. Explain why you're transitioning or why you want to transition into CDI and how your current experience aligns with the specific role requirements. Detail what you've done to prepare, such as taking CDI courses, exams, or mastering writing compliant queries. Then you want to prepare for CDI interviews and assessments. Once you start landing interviews, be prepared for both verbal interview questions with the possibility of a written proficiency test. Many CDI roles assess your ability to analyze clinical documentation and apply CDI and coding concepts in real time. Any interview that I've ever been on for a CDI professional, on the interview, I was asked specific clinical indicators for specific conditions, and I was also asked specific coding scenarios for the clinical conditions. Now, here's a side-by-side look at a polished resume versus the typical resume. Notice the difference. Even before reading the content, the structured, aesthetically pleasing resume tells me a lot about the individual who submitted this resume. First of all, it tells me that they're organized. A well-structured resume reflects attention to detail, which is critical in CDI work. They took time and effort. Employers notice when candidates go above and beyond, which sets you apart. It showcases writing and organizational skills, essential qualities for crafting clear and compliant physician queries. You want to make sure that your resume is clean, easy to read, and customized for each CDI job posting. And you want to make sure you're using relevant keywords. So once again, they've listed all of their skills, their certifications that they've gotten, their education, their summary, and they've listed their professional experience all in an organized and aesthetically pleasing resume. Again, very easy on the eyes, can read this very quickly, and it highlights key skills, key education, key certifications. It also has the headline up here with their credentials, RN, BSN, CDIP, CIC. I see right away that this person has invested time, they've educated themselves, they have the credentials. And again, it tells me how many years of clinical experience they have. So someone who doesn't have any CDI experience, who on their own initiative goes out and gets their CDIP and or their CIC or another credential, whatever that may be, tells me a lot about that individual. One, it shows initiative, it shows ambition, it shows that they take value in education. And then to exemplify it on a resume that looks like this is sets them apart from other candidates. So here's an example cover letter, and let's go through the pieces that are necessary. So number one, you want to introduce your clinical experience, which again is extremely important in a CDI role. Most employers like you to have some ICU experience, med-surg experience, and or ED experience, anything that you can highlight and the number of years of nursing experience that you have and how that would translate well into CDI. So next, you want to connect your clinical experience to the role you're applying for, okay? Number three, you want to showcase all that you have learned about CDI and coding. Number four, you want to exemplify your technical skills and adaptability. I can't say enough because one thing that is extremely important is to showcase how you can adapt well to different software applications. Because when you get into CDI, there are often many applications that you have to use to do the job. So exemplifying all those technical skills and EHRs or other programs that you are familiar with and or that you can use multiple systems at one time during your day, because again, that is essential to CDI. And in a remote role, particularly, you want to exemplify that you have troubleshooting skills, that you can handle any technical issues, because again, you to be able to adapt and be technically savvy. And the role might require you to do PowerPoint presentations for physicians. All right, and then conclusion with enthusiasm. People want to hire people who are excited, people who are passionate, people who are ambitious. And that's what your cover letter needs to represent. It needs to show that you're ambitious, you have good critical thinking skills, that you are intuitive, and that you're adaptable, you have good attention to detail. All of those things need to come across in your cover letter. And that is why, again, it's much more difficult to explain your point of view and why you think you're a good candidate for this role in your resume, but your cover letter can be a game changer. All right, our last step is going to be to network and get CDI experience without the job. So number one is joining CDI communities. Become active in CDI networking groups on Facebook, LinkedIn, Actis, or HEMA. Participate in discussions, ask thoughtful questions, and connect with experienced professionals who can offer guidance and potentially refer you to opportunities. Mentoring. Look for mentorship or training opportunities. Some hospitals offer CDI-related training for nurses and coders looking to transition, or reach out to maybe the CDI manager or director at your facility where you work currently and just go have a preliminary meeting. Even if they don't have a role open, just say you're interested in getting into CDI and what do they recommend for the path? Because different facilities may have different viewpoints. And again, the best way that I have found to get your foot in the door to get some CDI experience is in the facility you're working at currently, if they have a role, or locally, getting a job locally and maybe doing a hybrid role. And then practice query writing. Query writing can be very difficult. Knowing the standards for a compliant query practice brief, again, knowing that, quizzing yourself on that, understanding what a compliant query is key. When can you do a multiple choice? When can you do a yes or no? When does it have to be open-ended? What are all of the requirements surrounded in the query practice brief? All right, so what is our roadmap to CDI success? Number one, of course, you want to learn CDI fundamentals and build your foundation, as we talked about. And that would be through education, the query practice brief, the CDI pocket guide, and a more structured CDI or coding course. Number two, after you've gotten your knowledge, you want to obtain a certification and prove your knowledge. Number three, you want to gain initial experience and be open to either on-site or hybrid roles. Again, really a hybrid role is kind of perfect because you get some training, you get to sit elbow to elbow with other CDI specialists, ask questions, but then you do have some days at home where you can practice what you've learned. Next, you want to market yourself effectively. Again, I can't say this enough, okay? You are showing your value. What is it that you're bringing differently than all the other applicants that they've gotten? Many nurses want to transition into a remote role or a CDI role, and it is very competitive. So you need to market yourself differently or stand out in some way so that you can showcase your relevant skills. Why are you different than anyone else who has maybe the same nursing experience as you? What makes you different? What have you studied? What have you done to add value to yourself that's going to add value to the role itself? And then networking, I can't say this enough, building professional relationships. Again, maybe making some connections with the CDI specialist on your team. So what are some next steps and some resources? The guidelines for achieving a compliant query practice 2022 update, that's going to come from Actis. There is a link in the description below where I've put together a document of all of these resources where you can get started. And I'll show you that on the next slide. All right, the CDI Pocket Guide. Oh my gosh, this is wonderful. And again, I'm not connected or affiliated with them in any sense of the word, but I am a huge fan of this Pocket Guide. It has all of the key diagnoses that clinical documentation specialists need to know and understand, the clinical indicators and the coding guidelines surrounding each one. They have free webinars. It's such a great balance between the clinical and the coding. They have example queries in here and all the things. Again, it's not end-to-end CDI training for a certification exam, but if you want to educate yourself and memorize, so if you get to that point of interviewing, to state clinical indicators such as AKI. What are the clinical indicators for AKI? What's different about AKI and ATN? Acute respiratory failure, what would you look for? Sepsis, what is sepsis 1? What is sepsis 2? What is sepsis 3? Again, you can expect that you would be asked those questions potentially in an interview or a subsequent assessment after an interview to display your knowledge. Again, the CDI Pocket Guide or the Unbound edition has all of those clinical indicators in there. Different facilities may use different clinical indicators, but the CDI Pocket Guide kind of gives you the standard, and then facilities deviate from there as they choose and use different criteria. But again, a standard, I think the CDI Pocket Guide is great for that. Okay, and then our link for this Certified Documentation Integrity Practitioner, the CDIP from AHIMA. Again, this is where I would start. If you're on the move and you definitely want to do clinical documentation as your next role, then this would be the credential that I would move towards next. Again, all of this is just my opinion from experience of having done this for 14 years. I would suggest this credential first. Again, because you don't have to have experience, if you have confidence in yourself and your ability to learn the CDI principles and the coding principles and the domains that are going to be tested, then this is where I would start. The amount that you put into this is the amount that you will get out of it, okay? And again, how serious are you? How badly do you want to move into one of these roles? I can tell you, having been in this for the past 16 years, it's extremely rewarding. It never gets dull. It's very exciting. There's always room for growth. There's so many different things you can do. So looking back now, again, I would not change a thing. I love what I do. And again, if this is something that you want to get into and you want to do CDI, here is a link to more information on that certification. But again, if you have some experience, which again, this video probably wouldn't be for you because you have a little bit better time getting a job with some experience, but the CCDS is also a wonderful credential and organization as well through ACDIS. AHIMA and ACDIS work together. Actually, AHIMA now owns ACDIS, which is very interesting. But again, either one of these credentials would be fine. Again, the CDIP is going to be a little bit quicker because you don't have to have experience. And again, the CDI Pocket Guide Unbound Edition is an adjunct or a supplement to that, but something that I really can't live without. All right, so this is this one-stop source. I'll put the link in. This is what it's going to look like. This is all linked. So the CCDS, the CDIP, the CIC, the CCS is going to give you some more information about each of these credentials and the education that you may need to get there. And then we have guidelines for achieving a compliant query practice. We have the CDI Pocket Guide. We have the CDIP practitioner there, the link for that. Moving on to some interesting roles that I found. I basically went out to Indeed, and what I plugged in is not clinical documentation specialist, because that gave me so many results that maybe weren't targeted specifically to clinical documentation specialist. When I narrowed my search to CDIP, which is that credential, and then I went to entry level at the top on Indeed, you can go to entry level as the experience required, and you can plug in entry level. Here are some of the results that I got back. Okay, so this is as of this recording. Again, we have a clinical documentation specialist here. I have the links, and I will link this document below. Again, we want an associate's or bachelor's degree in nursing or medical school graduate. We want RN, it needs to have 5+ years experience of acute care experience, coding utilization review preferred, but not necessary, 1+ year of clinical experience preferred, licensure and certifications as applicable. You need to be an RN with either a Texas or complex license within 60 days. You need to have a CCDS, CDIP, or CCS certification for medical school graduates, okay? So this would be your RN with your CDIP. They're not looking here per the experience in this role for CDI experience. So your next one is an RN clinical document specialist, and this here qualifications is a nursing program graduate, bachelor's preferred, 1 year of related documentation experience preferred, but it's not required. Licensure for an RN licensed in New Mexico or compact state. No direct patient care, adheres to hospital policies and qualified standards. Okay, so here again, we have 1 year of related clinical documentation improvement specialist experience preferred, but it's not required. Okay, here's our next one. This is a hybrid role. So again, you're going to have to live in this state, and this is in Melbourne, Florida. Clinical documentation specialist qualifications are high school diploma, RN, CCS, CIC, or equivalent. Preferred is the CDIP or CCDS. You can see why I've picked these certifications to go over in the video. Experience 2 years in nursing or inpatient coding. So 2 years in nursing is all of the experience required. Now they do prefer to have 2 years in CDI, but that's not required. Strong critical thinking, communication, and Microsoft Office proficiency, and you must reside in Brevard County. Again, so Microsoft Office, we talked about that, making sure you're proficient in Outlook, Excel, and PowerPoint, and brushing up on those skills as well. So then we have the RN Clinical Documentation Integrity Specialist. This is a registered nurse in the state of Tennessee. That's the education experience that is required. You must have a strong clinical background, a minimum of 5 years of bedside nursing, must be computer literate, again with the technical, with experience in Microsoft Office and or Excel. The preferred candidate would have an understanding of reimbursement principles and or coding concepts, experience with 3M 360. The position requirements and licensure required current Tennessee licensure or multi-state licensure from a compact state must be obtained within 3 months of hire for non-Tennessee residents. And the preferred is a CCDS or CDIP. Again, if you don't have any experience, it's going to be the CDIP. Clinical documentation specialist hybrid. Okay. Qualifications, education, RN, MD, PA, CRNP, CC, or RHIA. Certification must obtain CCDS or CDIP within 2 years. Location must be in or near Baltimore. Okay, so this is interesting. So we only have to have an RN or a CCS, and we talked about these 2 credentials, or RHIA, and then your CDIP, or then you can wait, get your CCDS in your 2 years, or take your CDIP, and you must be near or in Baltimore. And this is a hybrid role. All right, clinical documentation specialist hybrid, requirements, education RN program, graduate BSN preferred, 3 years acute care, 5 years preferred, ED, ICU, neuro, or step-down experience preferred. Skills, strong coding knowledge, data entry, and communication. Again, we're seeing why I recommended the CIC. Employers really like you to have both clinical and coding knowledge. Certification, RN licensure required, CCDS or CDIP preferred. This is in Springfield, Missouri. All right, and then on our next page, we have 3 roles that I was able to find in the search that don't say that they require CDI experience, and these are remote. Okay, so they are out there. They are much harder to find, and I had to dig a little longer to find these. But here we go. So we have a registered nurse, clinical documentation specialist. This is a 4-day-a-week job, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., and it's remote. So the minimum job qualifications are licensure or other certifications, current RN licensure in the state of Georgia, educational requirement, associate's degree, minimum of 5 years in the practice of professional nursing. Preferred, we have the preferred licensure or certification of the CCDS or CDIP, preferred bachelor's in nursing, additional education in finance, healthcare regulations, and diagnosis procedure coding, preferred experience in healthcare utilization management or revenue management. And again, here are some other skills. And again, for the candidate who takes the initiative to do their CDIP and also the CIC to get the coding knowledge would give you a definite edge over someone who doesn't have any experience in any of these principles or certifications. So the clinical documentation specialist CDI remote, the qualifications for this role: have a bachelor's degree in healthcare related field, 3 years clinical experience required. There's a typo, but I copy and pasted that. Have previous CDS background preferred, have all related licensures, must be current, active, and in good standing in the state of Pennsylvania. Have healthcare provider at hire, have knowledge of regulatory guidelines of Medicare Part A. This is all I found for the qualifications for this role. And then we have a clinical documentation specialist 1 remote. Minimum qualification for the ideal future caregiver include a high school diploma, GED or equivalent, experience as a clinical nurse, inpatient or outpatient coder, or 2 years experience as a clinical documentation integrity specialist. Preferred qualifications for the ideal future caregiver include an associate's degree in a healthcare related field, registered nurse in the current state of employment, ICD-10 CM, CBT, HCC, and HCPCS inpatient or outpatient coding skills. Our ICD-10 CM and PCS are going to be inpatient. Our CPT and HCPCS are going to be outpatient, or a CPC with CRC, RHIT, or RHIA strongly preferred. And for this role, you must reside in Florida, Ohio, or Nevada. All right, guys, so that's going to be it for this video. Please reach out with any questions you may have. I hope you find this helpful. I really wanted to do this because I do get a lot of questions: how to get into CDI with no experience, or how do I find a remote nursing role with no experience? And again, CDI can be one of those roles, but also there are a plethora of jobs out there that do require a coding certification as well. So if that's the route that you'd like to go, again, that's completely a viable option as well. But if you would like this resource, then it is linked in the description below, and you can just download it for free. And then I also have included the entry-level CDI roles that I was able to find at the time of the recording of this, and we are in March of 2025 right now as of the date of this recording. I will include that in the resources as well. But I do encourage you to go to Indeed and do the filtering that I suggested with the CDIP and then the entry level, and that will give you up-to-date roles. I mean, there's also some on LinkedIn. There's so many places that you can go to find, but I just wanted to do a quick search with some filtering capabilities, and this is what I was able to find. So in any case, please reach out with any questions. I do hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next video.